Starting. Welcome today. I'm so glad that you could join me. We're discussing the role of toxic shame and depression today with my special guest, psychologist Dr. Shawn Horn. I'm so glad that you could join me. We're discussing the role. My apologies, I've got some technical issues going on in the background, and so I'm just going to pause that right now. So we'll just start that again. Welcome everybody. As today's a little bit different and exciting, and as you can hear, there's some technical issues going on, but this is the first time we've ever done a live broadcast for this YouTube channel. So I'm really pleased that you're here, and maybe you could just say hi in the chat box. I believe that there's a chat box. Maybe let me know where you're from in the world, because I'm from New Zealand, in Hamilton, New Zealand, and my guest is from Spokane, I believe is the way you pronounce it, in America. So where are you from? So we'll also be having some question and answers at the end with Dr. Shawn, so make sure that you stick around for that. So with all my interruptions, I don't know if I said that we're discussing the role of toxic shame and depression today with our guest, Dr. Shawn Horn. If you haven't met me before, I'm Dr. Janelle Sinclair. I'm a biochemist and a natural medicine practitioner. And on this YouTube channel, we normally discuss natural strategies for depression and anxiety. But today's a little bit different, as I said. And so let me introduce Dr. Shawn Horn to you. Dr. Shawn and I actually met on Instagram, and I was drawn to her because of her vibrancy, her values, and her authenticity. And if you like Instagram and using it, make sure you check out her account there, and maybe mine too if you haven't linked up with that yet. Hi, Dr. Shawn. So lovely to have you here today.
Thank you. It is such a wonderful thing to be here today.
Awesome. So, Dr. Shawn, I know that you're a psychologist and that you've got over 24 years of experience in the mental health field, and I believe 18 years in private practice. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I started working in the mental health field in the early 90s and received my doctorate in my master's in 2000 and doctorate in 2004, and opened up my private practice here in Spokane, Washington. I'm also faculty at the University of Washington Medical School and have my hands in all sorts of things. So after all my years of working in private practice, I have had the experience of becoming somewhat of a leader in our profession and in our community. And I felt called that I now want to bring what I know to a larger audience. And that is why I'm here.
Awesome. I understand that you did your PhD in shame-free parenting. So you're obviously an expert in the topic of shame. So can you tell us, what is shame, or shame psychology all about?
Yeah, so my doctorate's in clinical psychology, and my dissertation I wrote on shame-free parenting. So I was fortunate to be introduced to this topic in the mid-90s by one of my faculty members, Nancy Thurston, who has done a lot to bring this information to our field. And when I was first introduced to it, basically what I came to understand is that shame, toxic shame, is at the core of most of our emotional and behavioral disorders. And as I got more information about it, I felt this is so essential that we address this, because if we're not, we're just putting Band-Aids on the symptoms. So in the field of shame psychology, we identify different kinds of shame. So we have healthy shame and we have toxic shame. And healthy shame is somewhat what we think about when people feel ashamed or they feel guilty. It is when we make a mistake and we have that conviction, and we use that information to inform our behavior, inform our choices, and to take the proper and appropriate action. So we want to have that emotional response that alerts us that perhaps our choices are not best or what we did or so forth. But toxic shame is the message that when you make a mistake, you didn't just make a mistake, you are a mistake. You're flawed, you're unworthy. There's something uniquely different with you than anybody else. And that becomes a core belief that the person ends up planting into their heart and then goes through life with what we call a shame-bound identity. And with the shame-bound identity, we end up taking feedback and translating it into a toxic shame message. So some of the leaders in couples therapy, John and Julie Gottman, in their theory, they say there's a difference between complaining and criticism. So complaining is where you're dealing with a behavior, you're saying, I'm really frustrated with this mess that you made, please clean it. But criticism is where you make it a personal assault, saying it's dirty, but of course it is because you're such a slob, you're disgusting. I don't know why I'm even with you. And this we recognize as verbal abuse. And essentially what they are talking about is the difference between healthy and toxic shame. So when someone has that and someone comes to them with a complaint, hey, I think you hurt the kid's feelings, they'll translate it into a criticism by saying, oh, so I'm just a terrible parent. Nothing I do is right. Or, oh, I can't clean. I'm just a slob. And then that's where we have a lot of misunderstandings because people will say, no, that's not it at all. So it starts to shade how we view the world, how we perceive information, how we respond to information. And ultimately, it leads to appearance management. It leads to a lot of defense mechanisms that we utilize to protect this very vulnerable experience of shame that we're carrying inside.
I can see how that happens, like just having a filter that we're filtering everything, and so anything anyone says is just confirming the way that we see ourselves or the way that we see the world. So whoa. Okay, so
Yes, and we end up we believe the lie of shame that says that our value and our worth are determined by external things. It's determined by our accomplishments or our body or our beauty or lack of beauty or material possessions, associations. We start to believe those messages that those are the things that give us value. And then we'll pursue that and over identify with those things, over identify with our roles, our careers, our possessions. And it just doesn't work. And so we end up walking around with imposter syndrome, feeling that we're a fraud. If people really knew who we were deep down, they would know we're not as smart as we have convinced people we are, or we're not really worthy of the love that we're receiving or the accomplishments that we have. So it can end up being very incongruent experience and lead to a lot of self-sabotaging, depression, anxiety, and social phobias. A lot of our diagnosis that end up blooming because we can't contain that feeling and we are trying to control that emotion and we're trying to protect ourselves from exposure. We don't want others to see it and we don't want to see it. So it ends up being a life struggle of trying to contain this, but it spills out. And we end up having unrealistic expectations for the human condition.
and I'm sure it affects a lot of relationships too. So if you've joined us live today, welcome to everyone that's here. We're just discussing toxic shame with psychologist Dr. Shawn Horn. It's a little bit different from the usual on this YouTube channel. Most people know that I normally speak about the natural strategies to help depression and anxiety, but I'm really interested in depression. So, Dr. Shawn, how is shame connected with depression? Can you comment on that?
What's so fascinating is they did research after the 9/11 incident in the United States to look at what makes people resilient and why are other people not. How was it that you had two different groups of people experience the same thing, but yet come out with such different emotional impact from that? And so when they looked at it, they identified three different variables that they found that distinguish between the two groups. And that involved people with resilience, where they saw the situation as an episode. It just happened. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They saw it as not personal, and they felt empowered. So it wasn't personal. It just was a fluke, and there's something they can do about it. But what they found is people that struggled with resilience ended up personalizing the experience. Of course, this happens. Bad stuff always happens to me. They generalize the experience, and that's how life is. It's always this way. It is negative and bad. And then they felt disempowered, and there's nothing I can do about it. These three things come out of our shame-bound experience. How we end up being shamed is that the adults in our world did not perhaps understand what was developmentally appropriate expectations for us. We were expected to have cognitive abilities that our brain hadn't formed to be ready to do those things. I like to use the example of metacognition, which is the ability to think about your thinking. And most of the time that doesn't develop till 10 or older. But children who are 3, 4, 5 will be disciplined, and the parent will say, I want you to think about what you're doing and then tell me. And they're expecting that child to have insight. And then when they question the child and the child doesn't give them the answer they want, they're further punished. And the child can't make sense of it. So they end up just, I'm a bad kid. Or let's say they had ADHD, or they had a learning disability, dyslexia, and the environment didn't understand that, and they were punished for their inability to read or sit still. And then they were labeled with that of being a difficult kid, being resistant, lazy, not caring. So these become the seeds of one's identity. So we don't know how to make sense of these things as little children, and we get the message that you're a bad girl, bad boy, don't do that again, and the child's not able to meet the performance demands that their environment is giving them. Now, it could be that the parents did this, but it also could be peers, siblings, and teachers. So sometimes you have parents that really create a wonderful culture at home that is very shame-free, and yet the child experiences a lot of shame through being bullied or through the peer environment. So when they have that experience, they don't understand it, they start to attach to the story that there's something wrong with them, that they're just a bad person with bad luck, that bad things happen. And because it's such a pervasive experience, they end up using the cognitive thinking error of generalizing. It's always this way, it will always be. And because their family of origin what had some dysfunction in it, or their environment did, they ended up coming out of it with a learned helplessness. And that ends up shaping how we move forward in this world, whether they are intentionally creating things, or they are just surviving what is there, what situation they're in. So people who don't have that, they often will feel empowered to create their dreams, create their goals, and think this is possible for me. But for someone who is depressed and who has shame bound, they don't believe it's possible. They expect the negative, and they're somewhat they're not hopeful that life can be any other way. They have never experienced it that way, perhaps.
Well, I was listening to a podcast you did earlier last year, I think it was, and you were actually saying that you yourself was diagnosed with a learning disability when you were young. So this is what you're talking about is pretty personal, isn't it?
Yes, as a child, I was given a test to measure my abilities. And instead of taking it, I drew pictures on it. I had all these bubbles. I drew dot to dot pictures. And unfortunately, I did not have the proper interpretation of the test. And so they ended up concluding that I had such a severe disability that perhaps I had cognitive delays, cognitive disabilities. And so I was put into a classroom with other kids who had those disabilities, such as Down syndrome or autism, and just very severe conditions. And being the people person I was. I just built relationships with everyone, but I wasn't motivated for school. It was not of interest to me. And so it wasn't until I was done with my high school experience that I really began my education. I went to a community college. I failed all the entrance exams, and so I had to start from the ground zero with basic arithmetics and all of the foundational things. And to this day, I still get frustrated with grammar. I get so anxious around grammar police because I kind of just by default figured out stuff. But I did not know until I started to try to do to maybe this is possible for me, that I started to discover that not only did I not have a cognitive disability, but I actually was gifted and very intelligent. But I had that message that I was the dumb kid, that I wasn't smart enough. And there is a part of me that still tries to prove to the world, see, I am smart enough, I am capable. And it's just, you hear it and it's still weaved into your life. And what I tell my clients is that therapy is not going to make those memories or those messages go away. It's going to give us a different approach to that inner talk, to the inner criticism, to those old messages playing over, where instead of resisting it or meditating on it and rehearsing the memories and agreeing with those lies, we can just see them like clouds in the sky and let them pass on by and just know that, well, it's part of my history, it's part of my story. So every now and then I will be reminded, and I acknowledge that, but this does not define me. We have to unglue from the story we were told about who we were, from what adults and kids told us about who we were. That story does not belong to us. And what I tell my clients is that how other people treat you is more to do with them. But as a child, we did not have that mental sophistication to understand that. But now we do. As a child, we did not have the freedoms and ability to tell people to stop and to leave or to change our environment. But as an adult, we do. So part of the healing process with shame is that we need to now become our best inner parent and choose to extend grace and love to ourselves. If you wait until you feel it, you will wait forever. You have to choose it, just like you choose to love the people in your life who are difficult. I mean, I've been married for 25 years. I have 2 adult children now. And there's times where I might not have really liked them so much, or I might have really been like, oh, I just hate this moment, and have all those negative thoughts and feelings. But that didn't determine my heart. I still had unconditional love for them. And I understood it was just an emotional inflammation in that moment. And that's what we need to do for ourselves. We need to choose love and be kind and compassionate to our story and our journey, and understand that that criticism that we apply to ourselves in our life, thinking that that is going to help protect us from being exposed and that it's going to help us be successful in life, that is a lie. It's not effective. It's not protecting us. What we resist persists. So we need to lay our shields down and begin to be open to a possibility that maybe life can be different, maybe our story can be different, and begin that journey. I did want to touch
Can
on
I?
something you
Oh, I was going to interrupt and just go back to one of the questions that I was thinking about, what the root causes of toxic shame were, and you spoke about, what parents or peers and what people have said to you. Is it also about what they didn't say? Is there also can you have a toxic shame from a void in your life? So parents that didn't give you compliments, didn't build you up, didn't help you find what your skill sets, natural strengths and skill sets were. Yeah, is that a thing?
That is a thing. We experience shame by what is said to us and what is not said, how we're touched and how we're not touched. Some people will say they go through life and they were never told, I love you. How do we make sense of that? How does one have a mother or father that never says that, or never shows up at your school events, or helps you or protects you by saying, no, you can't stay out at night. No, you must do your homework. You can't be making these poor choices. When parents create that structure and that involvement, it does communicate love. And so when they don't, we have to make sense of, why is that happening for me, but it's not happening to these other kids, where all the parents are there, but mine are not, or they're distracted and they're busy with other things. How am I not worthy enough to have them stop working and be with me, or stop drinking, or stop being with their friends or their relationships, to prioritize me as their child? And when they don't, we just feel unworthy and unlovable, and we don't understand it.
Okay. So I talk a lot of, on my Instagram accounts and on this YouTube channel about looking for characteristics of a deficiency. So take, for example, a zinc deficiency. Depression and anxiety are one of the symptoms, but so is stretch marks, and so is little white dots in the fingernails. So when it comes to depression that is caused by toxic shame, are there any certain characteristics that we should be sort of looking for? Or and you as a clinician, when you're listening to someone's what someone's saying, or talking about their history or their language patterns that where they're using, what sort of characteristics do you look for?
It's a good question. I think one of the ultimate expressions of shame is suicidal thinking. If you look at a person who is shamed, their identity is being merged with the behavior or the problem. So instead of giving the child the message, it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hit, they're told bad child. And so because we get that message that our identity is merged with these problems around us, or our behaviors or our emotions, then when we're grown-ups and we have a circumstance, a stressor, and a personal struggle, if someone has been shamed, their solution will be, I want to die. But it's not them that is, their life is not the problem. It's the situation, or the lack of skills, or the lack of solutions. And so then they go to the one solution they know. So if you think about a toolbox, their only tool is a hammer. And one of the ways that we're shamed is that we're not equipped. We're not equipped to be skillful in life, to understand our emotions, to understand how to tolerate distress, how to regulate our emotions, how to understand these thoughts that we experience, how to resolve conflict, assert yourself, set boundaries. There are no skills that are given to that child, or minimal. So what happens as adults, one of the things I see that tells me that they have a very strong shame dynamic is they continue to not understand the human condition by having unrealistic expectations for themselves and others. They will compare themselves to other people that they perceive as being masterful, and they don't consider the variables that are in that other person's life that is helping them be successful. I use the example that you have a single mom at home who is working 2 jobs, and she's just doing everything she can to get the kids showered and walk out the door in clothes that are clean. But she has a neighbor who next door puts out all the decorations, makes the homemade cookies, has an immaculate house. And she looks at her and thinks, why can't I be like that? But that mother has a husband, maybe she has a maid service, maybe she has different situations. So we really need to make sure that we guard from comparing our insides to other people's outsides. Because what we see and what we imagine is happening in that person's life is just an imagined scenario. But we don't realize that it's a delusion. It's a perceived delusion of how that person's life is. We end up believing our thoughts and our feelings, like thoughts are truths and feelings are facts. And that, again, reflects a lack of skill. I've taught my children that your thoughts and your feelings inform you, but they can also misguide you. So you need to have skills to navigate through that and not believe everything you think and feel, but really utilize some other skills to sort through that.
Yeah,
So a shame-bound person.
Dr. Shawn, like when someone's got low blood sugar, the emotions are going to be so heightened, or the week before their period's due, they've got that PMS anxiety tension. So their emotions might be telling them that things aren't great, but actually on that day, it could be just because they haven't made good food choices, or it's lunchtime, or it's their period's coming and they need to do some things about PMS as well. So, so as you say, emotions can't always be trusted. They're telling us, they're giving us a warning, aren't they?
They are. And what you just said right there is what motivated me to become a psychologist. I was at church, I was in women Bible study. This woman was struggling and she kept going to the pastor and they were praying and praying and praying, and she wasn't having any resolution. And I realized that again, when people don't know what they don't know, that when we don't understand something, we'll attribute it to, well, you just must be not trying hard enough, or you must not want it, or you're not praying right, or you must have a sin, or there's something going on to where this is how God is doing this to you. And this again shames people because they know that, gosh, I am praying, I have asked for forgiveness, I'm doing all the right things, but I cannot get rid of this condition. And then they can go see a doctor and find out that they have low thyroid, and that's why they have depression. Or for a man, they have really low testosterone levels, which we know creates depression, or low vitamin D levels, which creates depression. So it's so important that when people seek help, that they really do the functional medicine, that they are looking at the circumstances that may be contributing, their history and the belief systems that they've developed, the core beliefs, the shame, the veil of shame that they may be seeing the world through, and how that's affecting them. Also, how their health. Do they have genetic vulnerabilities? Do they have a medical condition that needs investigation? And very importantly, their lifestyle. Are they exercising? Are they eating the proper nutrition that will help their intestines to absorb what it needs to absorb to make those positive chemicals? You did such a lovely job. I can't stop talking about it. I'm such a fan of yours. I cannot stop talking about your dopamine series. It was so, so good. And you just made it so clear of how that tyrosine, how it absorbs into our intestinal walls, creates the dopa, and how it goes up to all these filters to create dopamine and norepinephrine. And a child who's been diagnosed with ADHD is expected to be lacking in dopamine and norepinephrine. But if that child is not eating enough protein, they're not going to have, or fats, they're not going to have what they need to make that dopamine. And if they're also deficient, they can't do the folate, or all the stuff you spelt out. We need to understand that, because if we don't understand it, they just think it's a phenomenon. They will personally attribute it to themselves or the child, which further shames people. So this is why it's so important to see a licensed or registered medical professional that is trained to do this. I've watched so many films with coaches that tell people happiness is a choice. And I just want to jump out of my skin. Sometimes it is a choice to be more willing than willful. It is a choice to say, I'm willing to seek medical care. I'm willing to follow the doctor's advice. But it may not be a choice that their body is having the condition it's having. And so we really need to make sure that we're seeing people that are competent and have expertise in the areas that we need, so we can get the proper help and not mistaken what's going on. Some phenomenon. Anxiety is that way. People who have panic attacks, anxiety, they go, I don't know, it just happens. It's like out of the blue. And they get so anxious about anxiety. But when you really talk to them, you find out that they had this circumstance or this health situation that was contributing, but it was so off their radar. So I say that most people that have panic disorders have what I call connect the dot disorder, because they don't have that awareness of that some circumstance may be contributing. So once we identify that, then we can equip them and they can begin their journey. I've also noticed that there's two things that tells you whether they're anxious brain or a depressed brain. The anxious brain says, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if? And the depressed brain goes, yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. So when you talk to someone who's depressed, they'll go, yes, but I can't because of this, and yes, but they're not, and yes, but that didn't work. The anxious person's going to say, but what if that doesn't work? And what if I can't do it? And one of the things that a lot of medical providers don't identify is that when somebody has been anxious for a long, extended time, they end up getting depressed. So a common scenario is someone who has ADHD, they can't meet the performance demands, they can't focus, they get super, super anxious. People are constantly getting mad at them. They're worried, worried, worried. They're like, your adrenals are high, kicking in high gear, all that cortisol. Their body starts to break down. They get tired of being sick and tired, and then they are knocked down depressed. And when they finally get depressed, then they seek help because they don't have the same energy. So they'll go to the doctor and say, Doc, I'm depressed. So the doctor goes, oh, well, here's the antidepressant. They don't even begin to ask, let's get some blood work to see how your thyroid, your hormones, your blood sugar, diabetes, all these things that you want to look at. They don't even think along those lines. Vitamin D, you might be somewhere sunny, but you're wearing sunblock all the time. So you're not getting vitamin D, or you're not absorbing it properly. And there's reasons for that. So they're not investigating it. And then they give them antidepressants, which addresses serotonin, but their problem is not serotonin. So when they get the more serotonin than what they need, they get serotonin syndrome, which creates anxiety and panic attacks. So they go to the doctor and say, it's worse. I'm not sleeping. I'm having panic attacks. I have such horrible anxiety. So doctor says, oh no, we better increase it. And there you begin the journey of the cocktails of psychotropic medications. They try them on every antidepressant, then they start combining them, then they start getting on mood stabilizers, and they just began down the wrong track to begin with. So this is where we really need to see, where is this depression coming from? What is the developmental history with this person? What's the medical history? What's the genetic load of their family? And I love the new genetic information that we're getting now about MTHFR mutations and just other information we're getting that really affects all of those areas that are involved.
I'm actually going to be doing a talk next weekend at an autism seminar, and I'll be speaking about genetics. So next week on my YouTube channel, I'll be giving a portion of that talk about genetics and epigenetics and how our lifestyles interacts with our genetics to affect mental health and mental well-being. So everyone check that out. That'll be coming up next week. So I agree with you, Dr. Shawn, that and it's awesome to connect with a psychologist that knows so much about the psychology, but then is on the same page that, hey, we've got to look at the biological causes of depression as well. But we'll stick to the toxic shame, because I really want to hear some more about that. So what are the keys to that are involved in healing from toxic shame?
So with toxic shame, we don't understand the human condition. So first step, we really need to understand, what is it that everybody experiences? We all struggle. And so we need to be educated in what is normal. Abnormal is normal. I just, in my column in TWA magazine this month, that I wrote on that in my connecting the dots area, that abnormal is normal. So we really need to correct some of those beliefs. The other thing is that we need to begin to learn skills of non-judgment. And non-judgment is seeing things as black and white, good or bad, right or wrong. We can still describe the hurtful and harmful and not judge it. Judging is where we put a value on it. So I struggled because I'm not good, I'm not worthy, or they're less than, or I'm more than. Instead of understanding that as human beings, we are not less than or more than. We are all equal in our human journey and experience. We have different choices, behaviors, circumstances that really set us apart with fortunate outcomes or unfortunate and even evil acts. And so when we look at that, we want to understand, again, that's the human condition of how all that diversity ends up settling for people. But as we learn to practice non-judgment, we begin to change the inner dialogue we have with ourselves. So one of the characteristics of shame is being very, very critical of ourselves, very non-forgiving, intolerant, a lot of negative self-talk. So that's where we need to start extending grace and knowing that we can forgive. That doesn't mean forget. Forgiveness is choosing to turn the mind instead of meditating on the offense. Lots to say about that. So I won't go into that too in detail, but learning how to practice non-judgment, learning how to disengage from the inner critic. Thank it. It has been trying to protect you. It's been trying to keep you safe from rejection and punishment and persecution, but it isn't doing a very good job. So we want to fire the inner critic and we want to bring in our inner parent to help guide us. So think about a coach trying to help a sports team. You have coaches that berate the players and coaches that build up the players. And that's what we want inside. That coach that berates us is not going to get the best performance from us. So we really need that coach that is going to help us go in the direction that's going to be in our best interest, that's going to encourage us and show us what is possible. So that's mind shift that we need to make. I like positive psychology in that it helps us to focus on what we want versus focusing on what we don't want. So in my therapy with clients, I'm interested in what we need to create. For example, I recently had a very major health transformation where I've lost 100 pounds. I don't weigh myself, but roughly about 100 pounds. And one of the things that made that huge shift for me is I stopped focusing on what I didn't want and I began to focus on what I wanted to create. So instead of saying, I don't want to be overweight, I want to lose weight, I started focusing on, I want better quality of life and I want to gain health. So when I did that, I began to look at, well, what foods will give me health? What lifestyle choices will I make? What a lot of people don't know is antidepressants are only 13% effective. And physical exercise, if you do 20 to 30 minutes of physical exercise a day, it is more therapeutic than antidepressants. That's a no-brainer to me. Move your body. Now, if you're depressed, sometimes it's an epic achievement to put your feet on the floor or to get yourself in a shower or to put fresh clothes on. This is severe depression. So we're not saying it's easy by any means or saying it's a choice, but there is help. There are resources and you can begin to take the steps. And I say that when you start to get emotion, that's when things start shifting. A lot of times people will wait till they're motivated, they feel it to do it. You have to start doing it to have that shift happen. A body in motion stays in motion. We've heard that. So I remember when I was a little girl, I used to look forward to recess. I wanted when's the time coming? I want to go swing. I want to play ball. And then now as an adult, I'm like, I have to go to the gym. I hate the gym. Like, why do how did I end up hating moving my body? And how did it become this thing that I had to impose on myself to do? So when I let that go and say, I'm only going to do physical activity that makes me happy. I actually enjoy. I enjoy walking. I enjoy kayaking. I enjoy hiking and all those things. So that's what I'm going to do. I don't enjoy going to the gym and beating myself up in some crazy class that's making me throw tires across the room. I don't want to do that, but I do want to go hiking. So it's creating the things in your life that fuel you. And when you do that, you have joy, you have peace. Our goal is not happiness. Our goal is peace and contentment and finding our hope. And so when we can find that, and see, this is the thing that holds a lot of people back. They will sabotage that and say, and block the hope, block those successes. And what I teach my clients is that that's their defense mechanism They had such a profound pain, being abandoned, being rejected, that they rather reject themselves than discover or experience that pain again. So deep down, if I try to fuel my soul and it's not fueled, then I am totally devastated. So I rather just survive with what I have and say it's not possible, then I'm not blindsided. So there's lots of little tricky things our mind does to us to deceive us. And in therapy, in psychotherapy, we really work on a lot of those things. And again, it depends on your therapist and their style. But there are therapists out there that will help you recognize the deception and really help you to rewrite those scripts and rewrite those stories that we tell ourselves. So focus on what you want to create. So far I've said that we need to understand the human condition. We need to learn appropriate expectations. We need to practice non-judgment. We need to change the inner critic, ungluing from those stories, and really be open to the possibility that maybe who you think you are and what people have told you that you are may not be who you are.
It's
And
exciting,
it's
isn't
time to
it?
go on a search.
I think that's an
It's,
exciting
yeah,
thing.
we're,
It can be
we're
anything we want to be, you know.
Yes, it's scary. At the same time, it takes a lot of courage. We need our support, and we need healthy people who will speak life into us, that will tell us it is possible, that will see that potential in us. But when we have a shame-bound identity, we will surround ourselves with people who give us the messages we are in agreement with. So it's time to change those agreements. If you agree that you're unlovable, you will have people in your life that will continue to tell you you're unlovable. And the deception will say, see, I told you, you're unlovable. And that's not true. So we need to change that agreement so we can begin to say, wait a second, that's not okay that you're telling me that I'm unworthy, that I'm no good, and begin to build a community of people who will accept you right where you are. Let's say you're an alcoholic or drug addict. Go to 12-step meetings and have people show you what's possible. See a therapist that's going to find your strengths and help you discover them. Begin that journey, build your faith, start pursuing your spirituality where there's beliefs that you are valued. You know, I love having this conversation with the Christian community, because you can go to this church and it says, come to God because you're the sinner and you're going to go to hell if you don't. And you go to this church and they say, come to God because you're a precious child of God and he loves you and wants a relationship with you. You know, let's take out the hell piece because that doesn't fit this example. But in this example, one is saying you're a sinner and unworthy, and so he died. The other one's saying you're precious and worthy, and he died. Well, what is it? And this touches a truth in life, that life is a synthesis of opposites. We are strong and we are weak at the same time. We can have sin and be precious and worthy at the same time. And so, talking to Christians, you can say, yes, there's sin, and he did this for us. And because you're so loved and worthy, so receive it. So it's kind of a mind bend in adopting a philosophy that understands that life isn't black and white. It is a process. Life is about the process, not the end result. So we're really kind of rewriting what we've learned about how we're supposed to approach life and how we're supposed to think about the world and think about ourselves. So a lot of my therapy with clients involves laying out foundations of philosophies that they can root themselves in to begin to move forward and be equipped in trying this new way of living and stretching your wings and flying, so that when you do fail, because we do every day, when we do struggle, because we do every day, we will have a different way of understanding it than how we did when we were bound with shame.
Cool. There's so much to take, so much good stuff there, Dr. Shawn. That's a lot to take in. But yeah, some great stuff.
Yes.
Looking for the peace and contentment, focusing on what you want, and non-judgmental stuff and connecting the dots. I reckon that's all awesome. So maybe just to finish with, what's one small practical tip that someone could implement tomorrow morning or tonight before bed that could help them in this area?
Begin to identify your strengths. And if you don't know what your strengths are, start asking people that are trusted. They're positive, they're not critical, they don't have a lot of judgment to self and others. So if you have a lot of people in your life that gossip and talk about people in a negative way, they may not be safe. I love the book Safe People by Henry Cloud. I think it's by Henry Cloud. And he really helps identify how to recognize safe versus unsafe people. Because when you have that developmental history, it's hard to know who's toxic and who's not. So we want to identify our strengths. We want to focus on what we're grateful for and begin to change the inner dialogue. So I like to use the tool that even though I experience depression, I completely love and accept myself. Even though I experience anxiety, I completely love and accept myself. Now your inner talk's gonna be like, no, you don't. Who are you kidding? That this isn't gonna work. It's some stupid affirmation. But trust the process. Fight for it. Fight for it like you would fight for your own child and say, no longer am I letting this person be bullied by this message. I'm reclaiming her or him, and I am going to believe that I am worthy and I'm okay the way I am. Yes, I have flaws. Maybe I have regrets. Maybe I have things I'm ashamed of. Maybe I've even engaged in some truly evil acts, crimes, who fill in the blank, but we can heal and there is hope and there is help. So seek out a professional, start surrounding yourself with this message to learn about shame with podcasts. And if you go to my page, you're going to get a lot of message about shame and how to think and tools to have, and in my podcast as well. So there's online resources, there's books. A lot of people are really resonating with Brene Brown right now and her material. And so as all this is coming out, it's time, it's like you have to go back to school and learn. So tonight when you're laying in bed, just begin to, when that negative thought comes that beats you up, say, stop. I am not in agreement with that anymore. And inside you hear, yes, you are. And you say, no, stop. I am not in agreement with this anymore. And replace it with a new agreement that yourself is not going to feel is natural. It's going to wrestle with you. I tell my clients it's like quitting nicotine or smoking. When you first stop, it craves and it says, come smoke me, come smoke me. So the shame will say, smoke me, smoke me. You know you want me. And we need to evict shame out of the house of our mind and begin to say, no, I am not in agreement with this anymore. It's a choice. It's not a feeling. So begin to choose that. Begin to be willing to choose that, as scary as it may be, and trust the process that it won't be as scary as your emotion is telling you that it will be.
Awesome. So you've mentioned the books by Brene Brown. Are there any other resources from yourself or other people that you would recommend?
Soon, I'm going to be releasing my resources. I have a shame quiz that I'm going to put out with helping people understand more about their profile and how their shame matches their ego defense, and also understanding the shame bound rules. I have really found an organization called the Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families to really be absolutely amazing in their material. It doesn't use the language shame necessarily. It is in there, but it's not as direct. But everything they are talking about is about coming. It should be the adult child of shame-bound families. That's what it really should be called. And you're learning these tips on how to reparent yourself. So there are local groups in your community. I participate in a group here in my community. I absolutely love it. And there's also an online forum. So they have groups online for 12-step meetings and adult children. So that's a great resource. And there's just new information often coming out about shame. So I would say popular books right now are out, and anything talking to a therapist that is going to focus on equipping you with skills. So I specialize in dialectic behavioral therapy, which is a very unique model that teaches people a lot of skills, but it also validates their experience. So it's based on dialectics of validating and pushing for change. So you want to find a therapist that will get to know you and really learn who you are and understand your story, but will not be afraid or avoidant of teaching you and reparenting you and giving you tools. We need that. I don't know how else people would get that. And so sometimes some therapy models will have people in for 5, 10 years, letting them process till they come to their own understanding. I don't have time for that. I want the shortcut version. So I say it's like chutes and ladders. I want the tall ladder, please. So let me get up there, and I need coaches in my life that are going to equip me with mindset, philosophy. Go get involved with a religious group that is aligned with you, um, and begin to just reconnect with our value and our spirituality and our understanding of this world in a hopeful way, not what shame has been telling us in a pessimistic and what some people say realist way, but it really is a hopeless pessimism.
Okay. So we'll tell the followers where they can find out more about you. You've got an Instagram account and you've got a podcast. So yeah, what else?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
no.
my handle is Dr. Shawn Horn. So it's DrShawnHorn. And if you do at Dr. Shawn Horn on Instagram, it will take you to my page, and also on Facebook. I'm encouraging everyone to come over to my website and subscribe so that you will get the information when I do release my webinars and my courses and my ebooks, that are coming, that they will get notice on that, and then they can benefit from taking my classes and getting that material. So come subscribe. If this really connected with you, I encourage you. I do have a YouTube channel. I haven't been putting a lot of material on it lately, but that will grow too, and that's the same handle as well. And my podcast, I just rebranded, and the new name is The Sassy Shrink. So it's spelled as it sounds, The Sassy Shrink. But if you put Dr. Shawn Horn in the search engine on iTunes or SoundCloud, it will pull up my podcast, and expect to see it rebranded here soon.
Great. Oh, that's awesome. So drshawnhorn.com is your website. So definitely check that out. So
Yes.
I've got one question.
Yes.
I've got one question here, and if anyone else is watching online, please feel free to write up any questions. So just bear with me. So I've got one question that came in through Instagram that said, unfortunately, I won't be able to listen, but I'd really love to be there. But would like to know, please, if relaxation therapy could help to repair the shame.
Well, when I think of relaxation therapy, I think of mindfulness practices. And mindfulness in DBT, one of the things that we teach in mindfulness is non-judgment. So you do learn how to be present in the moment and not be stuck in what I say pasteurizing or future tripping, which the depression is stuck in the past a lot of times, and anxiety is anticipating this very scary future. So mindfulness and relaxation can really help us tune into the moment, tune into our body, find a way to be at peace with the here and the now, which we have to be shame free to do that, to really accept, to radically accept the moment as it is, to accept our body as it is, our emotions as it is, our thoughts as it is, without resisting, without avoiding. So it is perhaps not a direct tool, but it involves all these elements to it, which we need to practice to be shame-free. So I think it's very imperative to have some sort of mindfulness practice or relaxation practice that one can use to help them be present and accepting in the moment.
Right. And just a question from myself. Maybe could we give some the listeners some examples of some affirmations? We say reparent yourself, be a good coach. Tell yourself what an ideal parent would ideally tell you. But sometimes when you don't, as you've said, we don't know what we don't know, and you can be like, what do I tell myself? So have you got 3 really helpful affirmations that tonight before bed and when they wake up in the morning, everyone write this down. I'll write this down at the end and maybe put it in the description of the YouTube video so that people have it all in writing, so you can copy and paste it, put it into your phone, put an alarm on in the morning. Maybe it's the first thing that you see in the morning. What's 3 affirmations that we could say tonight before bed and in the morning?
Well, I'm going to take this a step further, and I'm going to give you a foundation for your affirmations. One of the things that I find that interferes with affirmations being effective is that you can't trick the unconscious. Like if you tell your unconscious, I am lovable, it's going to go, please. It is not going to get on board. It's going to fight you. So we have to practice self-validation. And self-validation is where you acknowledge what you are feeling, what you are thinking, and then give yourself an affirmation. So I call it the kiss and kick technique. So if I had a child that was saying, I'm sad, or I'm sad because I don't have my teddy with me. And the parent says, it's okay, honey. You don't need teddy. You are perfect just the way you are. And you can comfort yourself. The little kid's going to look at that parent and go, what about that did you not hear? I want my teddy, right? So our emotions do the same thing. Our emotions are giving us information. If we don't hear it and listen to it, we'll have this inner battle going on. So we need to turn around, just like we said, child, say, you are sad that you miss Teddy and you want Teddy right now, right this second. It, it comforts you so much. But you know what, honey, we don't have Teddy. So let's give ourselves a hug and say, I have all the love I need. Something like that. So with ourselves, when we have affirmations, like typical affirmations is I am worthy, I am lovable, I am perfect just the way I am. Now we're saying these things because we don't feel those things a lot of times. So we must first acknowledge that we don't feel that way. So it's even though I struggle with loving myself, I am completely lovable. Even though I experience feeling unworthy, I am worthy just the way I am. If you are able to acknowledge that, your subconscious will lay its shield down and will allow it to receive that new affirmation because it goes, okay, you hear me, and then it might be more receptive. Now, you may not need to do that every time because you've acknowledged it, but at some point, we need to acknowledge and validate the real experience. This is hard. I am struggling. I am discouraged or insecure, or I'm experiencing. So here's another trick is that you want to describe it instead of saying I am. So you say, I am experiencing doubtful thoughts versus I doubt myself. I'm experiencing anxious thoughts versus I am anxious. I'm experiencing a lot of negative self-talk versus I hate myself. You can say, I noticed that I just had the thought, I hate myself. So you want to see it as this thing that you're experiencing rather than who you are. So name it and then replace it with a new belief. So my new belief I choose is I am lovable. I am worthy. I am perfectly imperfect. I am acceptable. I am beautiful. I am intelligent. I am fully capable. I have everything I need to reach my goals, to be supported in this world. God supports me 100%. So it just kind of depends on what that person needs to hear. But whatever it is that we're wanting, that we see in other people's lives, we can, instead of being jealous and envious or discouraged, recognize that that person, you're reacting to it because they're showing you what's possible in your life. So let those people and that life be an inspiration to you rather than a discouragement. So if you see someone having the success you're having, instead of going, oh, why them and not me? Say, thank you for showing me what's possible, because I too can have the same success.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, Dr. Shawn. It's been so wonderful to have you here tonight. And yeah, I've learned so much, and it gives you a bit of a mind boggle, I suppose, and just going, there's so much to learn and so much to apply to our lives. So thank you. And for anyone that's listening, let us know how you've enjoyed tonight, and if you like going live, and if you'd like us to do it again in the future. Trust you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Thank you.